I'm Marshall Shannon with Ministry Design Concepts. Thank you for attending our webinar today on basic characteristics of churches. We're going to look at these by size, meaning small church, under 200 people, medium church, 200 to 400 people, and a large church, 400 people and up. Anytime we go to master anything in life, whether it be riding an animal, for instance, when I was a child, 6 years of age, my dad is from Wyoming, and they're wheat farmers and cattlemen. And so in doing that, they had horses and a corral and barns and silos and everything that a farmer would have. And they stuck me on a horse in a corral and started walking me around. Well, at first, my cousin, who was much older than me, was holding the reins and doing that. And sure enough, the horse started bucking. I had no understanding of the characteristics or the nature of that horse when I got on it, and it frightened me. I really did not want to get back on a horse until I was 13 years of age, and I hopped on a horse out in another uncle where I was reared in Mobile, Alabama, and I hopped on his horse without a saddle, just out in the field in a fenced-in area, probably a couple of acres fenced in, and the horse took off running. Well, where it took off running to was the one tree that was inside of that fenced area, and the horse was going to knock me off by running underneath a tree with low limbs. And so I hopped off the horse and I learned a lesson. I still did not understand the nature or characteristics by rule of thumb of those horses that I sought to ride. Now the interesting thing is my younger sister raced quarter horses in high school. She understood her horse, the nature of horses, how to get the most out of them, how they were going to respond when in the trailer being hauled, when being pulled out of the trailer and taken to the corral or to the stable, how to feed them, how to give them proper rest and nutrition. I mean, everything about it. She became an expert on quarter horses, and in particular Jockatan, her quarter horse. Well, let's move that illustration over to pastoring in your church. Do you understand the basic characteristics of churches when they grow from very small to very large? And so as we look at this, I decided to follow a format used by Gary McIntosh in his book, One Size Doesn't Fit All, by asking 10 questions. And then I filtered it through my own experience and what I've learned through the years, having pastored for years and now pastoring pastors. Here are the 10 questions. We're going to look at 5 of them in this one webinar. What is the church's orientation? How is the church structured? Who sets the direction of the church? What is the pastor's role in the church? How are decisions made in the church? And what is the place of staff in the church? How does the change take place in the church? And how do churches grow, and what are the obstacles to growth, and what are the strategies for growth? Each of these things we're going to look at, and we're going to start with the first 5 and break it down into 2 parts. So what is the church's orientation? What is the centralized organizational principle that the church is following? You'll understand what I mean as I explain here. So when you look at this, first with small churches, which 80% of the churches in North America have under 200 people. I was told the other day that 70% of the churches in North America have under 100 people in attendance. And so when we talk about small churches, they're going to be viewed in relationships. By that I mean an extended family. So you have family ties in a small church that is binding the church together. They're a large extended family which produces a feeling of kinship. So they're one big happy family. Everyone knows everyone else. The names of everyone, their children, their grandchildren, where they work, their history, their interests, their hobbies, any health issues. You may find in some churches that you have a key family and everyone is related in one way or another through marriage or bloodlines to that one family. And sometimes you may have two families who are the key groups. And in a small church you have that, and there are consequences from that orientation. So when everyone knows everyone else, and that family has been in that church from the beginning, and we're talking about an established church, and maybe you've gone to be the senior pastor or the pastor of that small church, and you need to understand how that church is thinking, how it is structured, how it is put together, how it is organized. There's an organizing principle, and for small churches, it's relational. So when the pastor preaches, he's not speaking to a sea of faces, but to family and friends. He's very familiar with all the problems, and he can speak directly to them. Matter of fact, he may use them in illustrations when preaching, if it's appropriate to do so. So when you have a church reunion, it's like a family reunion. Meals are like a family reunion. And so small churches are characterized by intimacy. They worship together. Everyone attends every work day that you may have in the spring and the fall. Functions and activities, everyone comes to it. They can't imagine splitting up into groups. Perhaps other than Sunday school being age graded, they worship all as a family. And in some small churches, depending on how small they are, when it comes time that it's obvious you need to move the children out of the worship service, doing so can be one of anguish because you're separating or splitting the family and moving the kids into another area of the building. And then you have to move workers out to tend to those children. And this can be a tough decision for a small church who says, well, we want everybody in here. We believe the family ought to worship together. And they don't want to divide up the family. And so there is that concern. And so the reality in the small church is that they are oriented to the fact that people are the most important thing. They're more important than programs. You can have programs and a vision and mission and values which are critical in a small church, but they must be approached relationally. So if you're going to have age-graded Sunday school, you're going to have children's ministry during worship, it's going to have to be looked at relationally, because the church, the small church, defines itself by the family. Their history and property and struggles and challenges and pastors and everything is defined by the family unit. The members measure their lives by the values and beliefs and commitments of the church family. The feel is one of a close-knit family with the culture and a history that direct the future and curb behavior. In other words, the member's identity might be shaped by their past, which makes them and they cling to tradition and a sense of permanence. We've always done it that way. That's not the way we do things around here. Or two phrases that, or we've tried that and it didn't work. So here's the application to small churches who are relational in their very orientation. That's the organizing principle of the church. It's how they're put together. Change and creativity can often be viewed as arch enemies because they're really seeking to remember the history of the family and remember Uncle Joe, and they keep a photo album and a written historian writes down the history of the church just like you would your family. And you teach your children about great-grandpa and granddad and great-uncle so-and-so. And you remember your heritage. And it's very, very important. And they just can't imagine doing things differently. The small church can often, not every church, remember this is a basic characteristic description of churches. But here we find that their goal may not be so much to change the world, but to know each other better. Refusing to change in order to reach more people is why a small church often stays small. But what it can lead to is the failure to thrive leads to the failure to survive. Then let's go from the small church to the medium church. And the medium church has grown because they've been able to do certain things by getting new people in and making them a part of the church family where they're cared for and loved and there's concern. And if this key family or families has been willing to do so, now that you've got more people coming, you've got more felt needs that are there, and you find that churches begin to create programs that will allow them to meet those needs. And so in nature, they're going to be set up not by relationships, but by programs. And so they function as a collection of family groups or subgroups. In other words, Sunday school classes, circles of one kind, women's circles, women's groups, men's groups, fellowships, clubs, ministries, and organizations. Instead of an extended family group, they've grown beyond that. And now what you've got is a family of families. And that's how their orientation is. The orientation or the organizing principle goes from one extended family to programs attached to various groups or needs. Decisions are made not based on what keeps the family happy, but how the decision will affect the various programs. The reality is programs are important, and maybe even more important than the individuals who are in the church, because the programs are affecting whole groups, not just one or two people. So the application of what is the church's orientation to medium churches is sometimes a medium-sized church is an overgrown small church viewed as transitioning from a small church to a large church. If certain things are not done correctly and the right adjustments are made, they can plateau or decline to a small church once again. So think of the medium church as a testing time to see if the church is going to be able to continue growing, not just sustain by stalling out at a medium church, but to grow into a large church. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, large churches are organizational in their orientation. So the central organizing principle is organization. They become a congregation of congregations. When the medium church grows into a large church, they take on the characteristic of a small church within a large church. Thus, they can use multiple services or locations to reach and care for more people. So they can reach further into their community. So you may find, as our little church plant that I'm a part of and helped start, we now have outgrown our facility and we have 2 services Sunday morning. Well, that was a natural part, and we just started this. And so in doing that, we're going to end up with a congregation of congregations. And if people aren't willing to make those concessions, from the small church where you're just one big happy family to a family of families, and now to where you're willing to better use and fully use your facility multiple times, or you go purchase property and have a multi-site, or you start a second church in some way. You've got multiple options here to help you with this. You'll go back to being a medium church. And so the large church is oriented toward organization, being a congregation of congregations. And so the members of a large church, characteristically, are challenged by innovation and change and creativity, and they see these as opportunities that would energize them, and it's a necessary part of fulfilling the Great Commission. It's why, Pastor, if you're pastoring a small church and you look at your sister churches that are large churches, and you see such a difference in the way people are thinking, it just seems to be characteristically generally speaking, the way churches are at different sizes. Then we want to ask, how is the church family structured, or how is the church structured? In small churches, we want to focus not so much just on the number of people in the church, but we want to look at how they're put together in cell groups. So a small church is a single cell that is in control. Small churches have one family or one cell. They might have a patriarch or a matriarch, a key family that is the leader of the church family, and these people might not be so much geared toward moving you forward, but they do have veto power. So they lead by stopping the church from doing things and preserving things as they've always been. Family history. Many times people in a small church are related or very close friends of the key family. So single-cell churches are characterized by a face-to-face fellowships with everyone at the table and in attendance. So it's a big happy family meal or reunion. So you worship together, you go on mission trips together, but it's looked at as one big happy family. So they have one or two families at the center of the church. They have a feeling of a large, loving family. They share the same history, memories, and concerns. They love and care for each other and are internally focused on their needs, their cares, their concerns, their preferences, their interests, as opposed to being externally focused on reaching outsiders with the gospel. So a newcomer can have a difficult time breaking into a small church and becoming accepted unless one of five things happens. Number one, they are born into one of the key families. Number two, they marry into that family. Number three, they may have an outgoing personality. And number four, they're gifted and the church family needs them. Maybe it's audiovisual lighting or a pastor or someone else who is needed. Number five, they share a crisis with the key families and it knits them together. And so the small church is structured as a single cell as opposed to a medium church that is structured as an expanded cell. Now, Gary McIntosh says a stretch cell. So I talk about an elastic cell. The key ministries that were present in the small church are still there in the medium church, but more is added. If the leadership group then, the leaders, the ones who are in control, were the one family and their family members are the ones who are in control because it's surrounded and oriented around them. If your leadership group is not expanded from one family to allow new people, the church will transition back from being a medium church to a small church. You've got to move from one cell to multi-cell to continue growing. This means fresh faces on the leadership team, on your governing boards, on your elder board, on your deacons, and so forth. Growth is directly connected to the new ministries that are brought into the church. When you open new groups, ministries, and classes, it makes an avenue or a way for new people to get into the church. And so the characteristics of a medium-sized church is that it has new programs and ministries are effectively bringing more people into the church. And the leadership is primarily drawn from the original family, and it's like a rubber band. If you don't stretch it, and small churches stretch to become a medium-sized church, so you've grown from 200 to 250 or 300 people, and you're in a testing time here. Understand this, that if you're not able to get other leaders in there who can help you get past the family mentality of history and let's keep things how they are, then you will go from expanding to retracting back to a small church. So the governing board must accept new people and new ideas and accept change in order to continue growing. In a large church, you have multiple cells. So if you haven't gone from single cell to adding cells and then to having multiple cells, you're probably going to revert back to being a smaller church. In the multiple cells, members are a part of numerous small and large groups within the larger church. They don't expect to know everyone, just their group within the group. They are loved and cared for, not in the one big family, but within their small groups. So characteristics of a multi-cell church is that you have too many people to know everyone. Number two, numerous groups, classes, and cells where people can get plugged into ministry, relationships, and opportunities for spiritual growth and service and to grow spiritually. Number three, church leadership is a representative of many groups, many cells within the church. So you may have some coming from this men's ministry or this particular ministry focused on one group of people, and your leadership is coming from different places within the church, not just one family in the church. It's not dominated like a small church is by a single cell. Number four, decision-making power doesn't reside in one family or group. Now, there's a list of questions that we'll give you in a handout that you can pull up to look at, to help you determine whether or not you are a small church having one cell, medium church having expanded cells, or a large church having multiple cells. So let's look at the third question. As you see cells within a cell for a large church, the next question is, who establishes direction? In other words, who sets the direction? Who is the leader? So let's talk first off, where we get to dealing with small, medium, and large churches. Let's look at who is in charge, and there are some ingredients that are a part of the leadership power. And the first one is that leadership power has as a key ingredient position, and a position is the official role of leader. Authority. Authority is the power to decide, the power to say yes or no. The second important ingredient of leadership power is authority. The third one is influence. And this is the ability to persuade people. And then control, the ability to get something accomplished. Every church has these. Now, in a small church, you've got a key family or families who are holding three of the four key ingredients to leadership power. So here's the rub. You as the pastor may hold the official position of pastor, but the authority to decide is being controlled by the one family who is predominantly, that's what the church is. That's who the church is. And so you're there trying to lead, and you're speaking and talking to your blue in the face. And while you're doing that, these people are being kind to you or listening to you in your deacons meetings or your elder meetings. And all along while they're doing this, they're not following anything. Or if they do, they work against you. And so someone in the church has to set direction, make decisions, organize support, cast vision, and set an agenda. Someone has to be in charge, but in a small church, it's probably not going to be the pastor. It's going to be a key family. There are exceptions to the rule, but that's normally what happens. And so you've got a patriarch or matriarch who is establishing direction in the church. So, as you look at that, a pastor may hold the position of leadership, but really has no power to make decisions or set agendas or organize support or cast vision. And frustration sets in with this situation. And a patriarch or matriarch is there running things, and you can't move along without their approval. They are the head of the key family and thus control the church. Usually they don't move the church forward, but they freeze it in time. They turn ideas and new ideas down. If a pastor is to move his church toward growth and becoming a medium-sized church, He must work relationally with the key family and the key family member and develop a working relationship that leads these folks to accept your suggestions by making them think that it's their idea. That's one way to work with it. So if you're the pastor of a small church, your job is not going to be first to lead the whole church. It's going to be to lead that key family and key family member. And one of the ways is to plant ideas and develop relationships with them until you're able to disciple them and to grow them and persuade them and to teach them. And so your focus is not making a command from the pulpit. It's going and working with these key families and seeking to win them. That's where your leadership ability is going to be activated in a small church when you have the position but not the control, are not the one who is the key influencer, that you find yourself having to do it this way. So, if a pastor is to move his church to a medium-sized one, he's got to work with the relationships of the key families in the church. Failure to lead the leaders will stall your church out and keep you small. You've got to work with this dynamic instead of against it. You've got to lead them in order to lead your congregation so you can reach more people with the gospel. Now, moving to a medium church, the ability to direct moves and resides in major committees or teams, other groups. And there's one crucial transfer. If it doesn't happen in a medium church, that the church allows others to share in the control, in the leadership of the church, and they aren't placed on the governing committee or board, however you're structured in your polity, the power of leadership must be transferred to include new people. If it doesn't, what happens is that the key family that was running the small church, if they don't allow new people who come into your church that's caused you to grow in number to have a part and a say, you will revert back because those people will leave and you'll go back down to a small church. So really what you've got is you've got a small church that has been extended, expanded, and they're elastic. It's a testing time to see if you're going to grow into a large church. So crucial transfer of control and power to make decisions has to happen. Included in this is the new people following your leadership as the pastor. And then in large churches, you've got capable individuals who are running things. And so it goes from different cells. The capable individuals are from different cells instead of bloodlines. So the people who are making decisions in large churches are people who have capabilities, capacity. They're able to do much. They have skill sets to lead and manage. And you're using those gifted people that God has put into your church family in order to carry out your game plan, in order to do church and be church and reach your community. And there you find that a large church is equipped then to grow larger and to reach more people. So what is the pastor's role in a small church? In a small church, he is being perceived in a certain way. And so they're going to perceive the pastor in a small church as our pastor, and you fill in the blank. So here's some examples. Our pastor loves everyone, is a great family man. And so the people in a small church are telling their friends and family outside the church about why they ought to come to their church. And it's attractional because the pastor is seen in his personal character. You know, our pastor, he loves everyone, and he's a great family man. Our pastor is warm and caring and friendly and a kind-hearted person. Our pastor is respected in the community. Everybody thinks well of our pastor. He's so good to deal with the people in the community. Our pastor knows everyone in the church by name, and he knows a whole lot of people in the community. Our pastor really is special. Our pastor has a great sense of humor, a great smile. He is witty. He is intelligent. He is capable. Our pastor treats everyone the same. And so they're looking at what? They're looking at our capability, our characteristics, and how we are in our character. Then we move to medium churches. And now they're looking at your personal capabilities. Our pastor not just loves everyone and is warm and friendly and kind and caring and respected and knows all the people's names and has sense of humor and treats everyone the same, but now they're looking at his capabilities. Meaning our pastor is a great preacher, teacher, organizer, planner, counselor, team builder, great thinker, fill in the blank. They're looking at their capabilities. And again, he's being used, we're being used as a attractional tool in the hands and lives of our church family to attract other people, to give reason why people ought to want to come to be a part of our church. And it has grown our church. So our character is needed. Christ-like character is needed. And then giftedness is needed. Capabilities. Capacity comes into play when you move into a large church. A pastor has to have character and personal capabilities, but he's got to have capacity to lead. And so there is where the people talk about our pastor is perceived in his leadership capacity, his leadership skill set. Our pastor has assembled a great staff. Our pastor could lead a large organization or business if he weren't a pastor. Our pastor really has the church moving ahead. You know, he's an outstanding leader. He's asked to be on boards of mission boards and Christian schools, and he's asked to be a part of the city council, and, you know, just take your pick. Because he's a leader, and there is a great void of leadership in our country, pastors of large churches have to have the capacity to carry out their capabilities in a large arena. And so they look at him as an outstanding leader and visionary and strategist. He's able to rally the troops and pull them together, pardon the expression, but he's able to marshal the forces. So the pastor's role changes, and how he gets things done changes. So the application here is this. When you as a church or you as a pastor and a church look to go fill the role of pastor, then you've got to make certain, churches do and pastors who are accepting a call to a particular church, you've got to make certain that you fit the church. And this helps us understand mismatches in the pastorate, in the pulpit, because you've got a guy who is able to lead by his character, but is missing the key capabilities or leadership skills to pastor a medium and large church. And so he struggles with it, the pastor's bandwidth, in one way or another. So you end up with the mismatch when you're looking for a guy who has a great leadership and you put him into a small church. Or you're looking for a guy to fill the pulpit in a large church and you pick someone who has small church characteristics. So as you look at this, pastor, if you're going to grow your church, it's not just using certain strategies or certain staff, but you yourself have got to have the bandwidth in your character, capabilities, and capacity to lead the church to become a large church where you're reaching lots and lots of people. And so here are some things to dwell on. The longer a pastor stays at a church and leads it to fulfill the Great Commission, the more opportunity he has to take control of the leadership. Gary McIntosh calls it continuity, in other words, staying power. It's the same thing that makes a small church attractive to others, is that you've got a family that has been there maybe for generations, and there's continuity to that. They have tenure. Well, the same thing with medium churches and large churches. As the pastor stays, it doesn't guarantee that you'll grow, but it's hard to grow church when you keep turning over the pastor. So here's some leadership observations. Number one, teams need a good leader, whether it's the pastor or the team leaders. Leaders' task is to cast vision or to carry the vision if you're a leader over a ministry in your church. Number three, God reveals his vision usually to one person, and then it is communicated and caught by the others in the church. Leadership authority in the church grows over time, that continuity. Leadership authority can be lost in an instant. Number six, if the pastor doesn't lead, someone else will fill that leadership void. And number seven, leaders attract criticism. If you're going to be in leadership, you're going to get whacked. You're going to get criticized. So the larger your church gets, the more opportunity you have for criticism both in the church and out of the church. Here's a second set of observations for you as a leader, for me as a leader. Number one, we need to love God. Matthew 22:35. Go to your passages in Mark where it says to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Deuteronomy. All right. Number two, you're to grow people. While a farmer is growing his crops, pastors are making disciples, so they're growing people. Number three, pastors need, if they're going to lead, to dream big, not small. People want to be a part of something that is larger than themselves. Number four, for goodness sake, lead by example. Number five, take initiative. Take initiative, which means, number six, if you're going to take initiative, you're going to take risk. There is no advancement in ministry without taking risk. If you're not a risk taker, you're not likely going to grow your church. Number seven, not only love God, but trust God. Now let's look at the last thing, and that is, how are decisions made in a church? Depending on the size of the church, and let's talk about small churches first, decisions are made in a small church by the congregation with the undercurrent is the key family. So the congregation is making decisions with heavy influence of the key person or family. Decisions can be made often in an informal situation, meaning riding in the car together, talking after church together, out playing golf, or at a family gathering at someone's home, that it can be made. Decisions can be made in an informal situation. Tradition and custom can often drive decisions. Direction by the pastor is far less influential in a small church. The focus may be to keep people happy, to meet the budget and stay within the limited giving of the church. It may be to recreate yesterday, to spend as little as possible in time, money, and effort, to maintain the status quo and minimize dissent. The pastor's influence in decision-making is done through relationships. He is working through the key family in order to win souls and make disciples. He must win the key people to his way of thinking and lead them to act on his ideas and vision. Now, some of you listening to this may look at this and say, well, that's manipulation, not leadership. If you're going to lead the church as a whole, and you've got someone else who characteristically is in control of that church and their decision up or down on anything you feel like the church needs to do to move the church forward to carry out the Great Commission and the posture of the Great Commandment, then you've got to work with those people. And it's not an easy situation. I've been there as a senior pastor. The way that I personally did this was that I was struggling with winning those people, and I would go spend time with them every week to win them to myself, to begin planting thoughts in their head and begin discipling them and challenging them and discussing them and floating ideas by them, because I was selling the ideas that I felt that we were going to have to incorporate in order to allow us to grow to a medium-sized church. And what happened was is that we reached people in spite of them, not because of the Key family. And eventually the Key family and everyone who had been tied to them for many generations, or for years at least, they just all in one week got up and left the church because they lost control. When you have this situation, it is a struggle to get things done as the pastor, because you have the position. You may be influential, but you don't have control, and it limits your ability to get things done. So in a small church, it's by the congregations making the decision, perhaps driven by history, with the undercurrent or support of a Key family. And then in a medium church, the decisions are made by committees or by teams, however you're structured. And changing needs. And that's where your programs and procedures and policies and ministries are developed, is because as a medium church, and you've gone from 100 people to 200 people to 250 to 275 to 300, and you're moving in your momentum toward being a large church, is that a growing number of people, and you see the need for different people groups within your church. And so now you've got an established youth group or college and career, or a singles group, or a women's Bible study, or an athletic recreational venture, and you're finding special needs, maybe single parenting or divorce, and you're trying to help them. Our financial needs are multiplied because you've got more families who are struggling with their finances. And so you look at all the changing needs, and you begin to develop programs and ministries, and you may go hire staff to oversee those programs and ministries. And so the decision in the church are made by committees or teams, the pastor leading it, to meet the needs of changing needs within the church. So new people coming into the church creates a need for additional programs and personnel. Then we go from that to the large churches. And here you have the staff and the governing body with the senior pastor making decisions. And so undergirding the staff and governing body is the strong leadership of the senior pastor. Now you've got all those categories where you have the position and the authority, and with this comes the influence and the control to get things done. And so as a church, you have the opportunity as a large church to contain the decision-making authority, ability, the control within a smaller group of people. So the senior pastor may be initiating change, and with his staff and governing board, they are the primary decision makers, and the governing board may make policy, but the senior pastor is free to lead on a daily basis to carry out the policies, procedures, and programs that he has initiated and helped established. And so now you have all four ingredients in the power grid and the power of leadership to get things done. So the decision-making is directed by the pastor's vision for the future. And everyone rallies around that vision that God has given the pastor to carry the church forward. And they bought into it, and now they're investing their lives in it. And you can get more done. So a church can grow from 400 to 800 pretty quick. Now, when you stop and look at the medium church that is stuck between a large and a small church, you'll find that often the decision-making power, or the way that churches make decisions when they're small, is they may be made emotional, and a large church would be on the other side of that. Instead of emotions, they'd be making rational decisions. Where a small church would be subjective, a larger church might be objective. Where they would make a popular decisions trying to keep everyone happy in the small church, the large church is looking at the merit of the idea or the decision that is to be made. Where a small church is informal and you've got some guys making it outside of a formal meeting, large churches making those decisions in their teams and board meetings, in their committee meetings, and it's formal. In a small church, it's family decision. In a large church, it's leadership. Now, what happens here is that the medium church is that stretched cell, that expanded and elastic cell that is a small church that is being expanded and given opportunity to go to multiple cells from a single cell. And so in your decision making, if you can't get new people on board and you change the characteristics by which you make decisions, you will probably snap back to being a small church because you really aren't a medium church. You're a small church that has gotten bloated or gotten expanded or has been stretched. You're elastic enough to grow from 200 people to 300 people. But if you don't make the necessary changes, the tendency or history shows that you will snap back. Well, this is the first 5 questions in looking at the common characteristics of churches concerning where they are, small, medium, and large. So, I'm Marshall Shannon, your ministry design coach. You can reach us at this email address or to either one of these phone numbers. If you have a question, and you may already have realized this, if you have a question, you can pause the video, scroll down, type in your question or comment, scroll back up, and hit pause, hit play, and listen to the rest of the video. If you stop it to submit the comment, it will start your video over again. So be aware of that. You say, well, Marshall, why don't you give this to me at the end? I'm just thinking about it as I'm doing this one particular webinar to help you. All right, I hope this has been of help to you. Pull out of this video and head toward the second one, dealing with the common characteristics of churches, small, medium, and large.